sharp. I want to welcome in Bryan Matthews from Auburn Undercover. Now, Bryan, thanks so much for taking some time out tonight.
It's great to be back in with you guys. I always enjoy it.
Well, thanks, Bryan. And, Bryan, we'll just start off with Big Cat Weekend. Obviously, that's what everybody wants to hear about, and everybody's been following you guys and on your website. And I know we have here at Sports Blitz for all the updates. And, this Big Cat Weekend started a few years ago by Curtis Looper and the staff at Auburn. It really has paid dividends. It looks like it's already paid dividends again this year.
It really has. I mean, if you go back and look at the first three, around 40% of Auburn's class is going to come from the guys that show up on Big Cat Weekend. And even though it's Auburn's biggest recruiting event of the year, it's not necessarily about recruiting. You're not going to see Auburn come out with 4 or 5 or 6 commitments from this event because, they don't spend a lot of time, recruiting kids. What they do is spend a lot of time socializing with them, doing fun things with them, spending time with their families, and just doing a lot of stuff to get them sort of away from sort of the pressure-packed recruiting that they usually go through when they visit a lot of these schools.
I know one particular recruit, we're going to talk about several of them. Ronnie Clark, one of the safety prospects, really came out and talked to you guys and said he had a feeling that he almost committed this past weekend. What prevented him from doing that?
Well, I think he's just, finished his sophomore year, summer before his junior year, and I just think he feels like he needs to take a little bit more time to make a decision. He's still got 20 months until he actually signed with the school, so I don't think he wants to rush things too much, but I think it's really clear that Auburn is in great shape for him. He named Auburn as the leader about a month ago when he came down for a visit, and that's still the case after Big Cat. And I think the most important thing with Ronnie was getting his parents down here last weekend, and they had a great time. I spoke to both of them, and I think they're more excited about Auburn than he is. So I think Auburn's in great shape with Ronnie Clark, who's going to be one of the best players in the country at safety once people, get his video out. We're working on that right now. This kid is a definite player, and he's got legit, 6'3", over 200 pound size, and can really run and has a terrific athleticism, change of direction.
Well, I want to go into the commitments that we do have as Auburn people out there follow you guys on Auburn Undercover, and one that really was a headliner this weekend was Carl Lawson, as a lot of people, and you guys included, bumped him up from a 4-star to a 5-star, the number 1 weak side line defensive end in the country, and 6'3", 245 pounds, and you can already tell the impact of Brian Van Gorder down there on the Plains.
Absolutely, and he's what you're looking for in a big time, college player. I mean, he's got great athletic skills, but I think the thing about Carl that stands out the most is he has a tremendous work ethic. I mean, he's gone to a couple of camps or combines this spring and just dominated. And it's not just because he's very athletic and a very talented young man. It's because he wants to be great, and he gets after it every chance he gets. So I think he's a guy that's going to come in and play right away. If you see him in person, you can see that he's already built like a guy who's been in college for a couple of years. You can say the same thing for guys like Reuben Foster and D-Liner and Montravius Adams and guys like that. But I think Carl's going to step in right away and help out Auburn next year as a true freshman.
We got Bryan Matthews on the phone with us from Auburn Undercover. We'll go down that list, a couple more guys that you just mentioned, D-Liner being one of them, and, of course, Trey Johnson. We had a phone call earlier in the show that asked me, said, how in the world is D-Liner and Trey Johnson not 5-stars? What do you think that's a possibility? I do. I think by the time the year's over, D-Liner and Trey Johnson probably will be 5-stars. What do you think, Bryan?
Well, I think D-Liner, Rival's moving up to a 5-star today, and I think he's got a real great opportunity to do the same on 24/7 and the other networks. He's just a dominating defensive lineman. He's one of those guys that's really rare for a defensive lineman, and an inside guy who can make plays and get in the backfield and is really quick and fast and really knows how to hit when he gets close to the ball carrier. I think he's got a great chance to amplify. So now Trey is a tackling machine, but he's not the biggest linebacker. He might not run the fastest 40. So he's a guy that may not get that 5-star, but I think he's going to be a high 4-star and a highly rated guy with most services.
Bryan, the last few years, when Nick Saban over at Alabama with the stellar recruiting classes, Auburn has matched as good as they can the last couple of years, having top 10 classes, really getting some top prospects in there. And again, there's been drama almost every year between the two schools with commits, decommitting, and then switching and all this kind of stuff. And this year it doesn't look to be any different. A lot of people seem to think that D-Liner has been with Auburn the whole time, but may flip to Alabama at the very end. And O.J. Howard, who's been with Alabama the whole time, grew up an Auburn fan, may switch to Auburn. And then, of course, the wild card is over at Auburn High School. Reuben Foster, the five-star linebacker that's committed to Alabama. A lot of people feel like he'll end up on the Plains. What are we hearing on that, Bryan?
Well, I think of the three you mentioned, the one I think has the best chance of actually flipping to the other side is probably Reuben Foster. He transferred to Auburn High School against the wishes of the Alabama coaches, and I think Hopper's done a great job just getting to know him and not really pressing him or trying to be, put on too much pressure on him. And I think Auburn's in great shape there. Eventually, I don't think anything's imminent. I don't think it'll happen in the next week. Auburn's in great shape there. We'll see on OJ. The thing with OJ is he did grow up an Auburn fan, but his parents are Alabama fans, and I think they're pretty firm with that. So I think there's still a possibility for Auburn, but I don't think by any means that's a set in stone deal. It's just one to keep an eye on. He did not make it a Big Cat weekend, so we'll see how many times he visits this summer and in the fall. And then, D-Liner, he seems pretty solid with Auburn. I mean, he's probably still going to visit Alabama once in a while, but I feel like he's pretty solid with Auburn right now, and I'd be surprised if he ended up flipping.
So, I know a lot of Auburn people kind of shy or a little sketchy with commitments after everything went down with T.J. Yeldon being pretty firm to Auburn the whole time in the last weekend on dead period switching. So I think that's kind of where a lot of that talk has been generated. So,
yeah, I mean, that's understandable, but, this is recruiting, things like that happen, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen the next year and the following year. Auburn fans need to remember that Auburn's got some great recruiters and some great coaches, and they know what goes on, and they're going to, take care to make sure things don't happen like that again.
We got Bryan Matthews on the phone with us from Auburn Undercover. Again, some other Ernest Robinson, Jeremy Johnson, Randy and I were talking, Bryan, before you came on. Seems like Auburn's and Auburn finished really good this past year, don't get me wrong, but they seem to be much more ahead of the game this year early on some of these big 5-stars and 4-stars.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've got about twice as many commitments now as they did last year. And, you can sort of see where this one's going. I don't think they're going to be positioned like they were last year when they went into signing day with, I don't remember, that number was around 10 or 11 guys. It was like may or may not be able to land in the last few days. So I don't envision that happening again. I think they're going to be much closer to being finished and just have a handful of guys out there. They're waiting on that final decision from.
Well, Bryan, a lot of interesting stuff for football. I want to switch gears and talk a little Auburn baseball. I know it was disappointing for Auburn not to make a regional again, and making the SEC tournament, only winning one game, able to beat Georgia. But talk about the situation with Pulowski. I know Jay Jacobs comes out and says his job's secure, and but what is the situation with Auburn and Alabama baseball? A lot of talk in the state is why aren't these two teams performing better than they have? And I know Alabama went to a regional last year, and it's only 1 year removed, but they were dead last in the league this year, and Auburn wasn't too far ahead of them and actually got swept by Alabama this year. So what's the feeling around this Auburn baseball program and being located over there in one of the hotbeds, not only in the state of Alabama, but in the country, right there in Phoenix City and Columbus, Georgia, and Troup County, and Atlanta just an hour up the road, and then Russell County. What's your feelings about that, Bryan?
Well, I think the expectations are certainly higher than what Auburn's done the last 2 years, and I think Pulowski's got 1 year to turn it around, and if he doesn't, Auburn will probably be looking for a new baseball coach this time next year. I mean, I think the expectation for Auburn baseball should be to be in a regional just about every year, to compete in the top half of the SEC, and to be a team that's capable of going to a super regional and competing for a chance for the College World Series. And Auburn really hasn't come close to that, the last couple of years, and just once really under Pulowski, and that was a team, whose heart was really, recruited by Tom Slater.
Yeah.
That was a team in 2010. It had a couple of big-time pitchers all the way Omaha. But they do have Pulowski and his assistants have signed a really good class. We'll see how that class survives the draft coming up. I think it's next week, or maybe this week. It's coming up soon, and maybe those guys can come in and really give this team a boost. The biggest thing for Auburn baseball right now, and if you look back, it really hasn't been consistently good since Baird left. And one thing with Hal Baird is he always had a number one pitcher just about every single year. And Auburn hasn't had a true SEC number one pitcher since Chris Butchek, and that's been about 10 years now.
Yeah, I was about to say, I haven't heard Chris Butchek's name in forever. And, that's unfortunate with the facility that Auburn has. And, Auburn's facility for forever was ranked number one in the country, and I know it's kind of fallen behind a little bit. So it's always a rat race against these schools and universities. You're seeing teams like Vanderbilt and Kentucky that are dominating now and are contenders that it's hard not to fall behind if you don't stay on top of your game, on top of recruiting, on top of facility updates and all that. And I know that's something that Auburn is battling right now. But Bryan, I tell you, a lot of hunger in the Auburn area and Auburn fans to have a good baseball team.
All right, and they should. They absolutely should. And Pleasant Park is still one of the most beautiful places to play baseball. Facility-wise, Auburn just needs to improve the infrastructure, the batting cages, the player lounge, things that are important to go out there and recruit and sign better players to come into this program. But I think Plainsman Park is beautiful and perfect. And if this program can get back to being good again, I think that place will start filling up every SEC game, and maybe they can start talking about expansion. I think that's something that could be in Auburn's future, but they need to find the right coach. That coach needs to come in here and be more consistent and win it.
Bryan, one last thing I want to talk about, and this kind of goes with basketball and baseball. A lot of talk, and we've talked about it on the show, of great talent escaping to the state of Mississippi. And look at what Mississippi State was able to do. A kid from right here in Alexander City who was committed to Auburn ends up at Mississippi State. It's their number 2 pitcher. I know Butch Thompson had a lot to do with that when he left Auburn and went to Mississippi State, and Kendall Graveman. But for the most part, a lot of players, look at Craig Sword leaving to go to Mississippi State to play basketball, and Alabama and Auburn both missing out on him. And what's the situation there? And I know a lot of people frustrated with seeing such great talent here in the state of Alabama evaporate and go over across state lines, whether it be Georgia, Florida, or Mississippi.
Well, I think Pulowski's done. I mean, if you look at his last class, he did good. He got a kid from Russell County, so from Birmingham and from South Lower Alabama. So I think he's done pretty good in state. But sometimes with these in-state kids, if Auburn can only offer him a third of a scholarship, and a Mississippi State or Ole Miss can come in and offer him a 50% scholarship, it's really hard to beat that. It's really tough juggling act sometimes. How are you going to divide up that scholarship money, and who's going to get a third, who's going to get whatever. So sometimes that can play a bigger part in where a kid goes over, or which school he prefers over the other.
Well, and I want to, in that same tone, and not to contradict you, Bryan, but what's Georgia's situation? I mean, Georgia has the Hope Scholarship, and they don't make a regional either. And I know a few years ago they made a College World Series championship series, but for the most part, they've been an inconsistent program as well. To me, I would think Georgia has it set up to be the best, or set up in the best situation of any SEC school.
Well, they should be, and they've been really inconsistent. And from a talent standpoint, they've always had a pretty talented roster. So, I think it comes down to coaching. I think, to me, college baseball is really a coaching a deal, because if you look at some of the great coaches, it seems like year in and year out, those guys have great teams. You could just have to look at the South Carolina, Florida State, teams like that are there every single year, and that because they have great coaches there. And Texas, USC, just on down the line. So it's a matter of finding that great coach and keeping them here. Auburn had I think Hal Baird was a great coach, because really, if you look throughout his career here, he's playing with facilities for the majority of it, which were as bad as anybody in the conference. But Auburn just has to find the right guy. Maybe John Pulowski in his 5th year can become that person, but if not, they're going to have to go out and find him.
And it's not going to get any easier, because you look down at the teams that made the NCAA field, 8 from the Southeastern Conference, 4 from the Big 12, and of those 4, Texas A&M and Missouri are 2 of those 4, so they'll be sliding over to the SEC next year. So not getting any easier for anybody as far as that's concerned.
That's right. It's going to get a lot tougher, and Auburn needs to step up and step up soon.
Bryan, we really appreciate you being part of the program. Always a pleasure to have you on, and look forward to having you on again soon.
That sounds great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bryan.